Who gave you permission?
Sir. The rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alessandro Romano's office, a relentless percussion that matched the storm raging inside his mind. It was well past midnight, the city beneath him a sprawling, indifferent mass of lights and shadows. Alessandro, mafia boss and kingpin of the Romano crime family, normally thrived in control. Every deal, every movement, every person in his orbit was calculated. Yet tonight, something was off. He had been reviewing old ledgers, receipts, and documents tracing the movements of a rival crew that had been testing his influence when he heard it. A faint shuffle, a near imperceptible sound, like paper brushing against paper, or perhaps tiny footsteps against the polished hardwood. At first he froze, listening. His instincts screamed that this was no ordinary disturbance. Alessandro's eyes narrowed, scanning the dimly lit office, the hum of the city now drowned out by the pounding rain. Then he saw her, a small girl, no older than 10, crouched in front of his massive mahogany desk, hands digging through a pile of papers. Her hair, dark and tangled from the rain outside, clung to her forehead. Her eyes, wide and terrified, flicked up at him, catching the glow from his desk lamp. She froze, as if caught mid-thought, mid-action, mid-life, her tiny chest heaving with fear and exertion. "You dare?" Alessandro's voice cut through the silence like a blade, sharp and commanding. The little girl jumped, almost toppling the chair she had been hiding behind. For a moment, fear froze her entirely, her lips parted, a whimper trapped somewhere in her throat. Alessandro stopped in his tracks. He had faced killers, thieves, and traitors. He had stared down men who would have killed without hesitation, and yet this child instantly disrupted the rhythm of his carefully ordered world. He could have shouted, called his men, or worse. But something held him back, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even empathy, that he had long buried beneath layers of strategy, intimidation, and ruthlessness. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice softer now, controlled but still brimming with authority. The girl swallowed hard, her small hands clutching an envelope with jagged edges, like she had risked everything to get it. I need this," she stammered, her voice quivering. "Please, I need help." Alessandro's eyes studied her face. There were streaks of dirt and rain, a subtle bruise on her wrist, and yet the defiance in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't just frightened, she was desperate, determined, brave in a way that both unnerved and fascinated him. He moved closer, every step precise, measured. He could feel the tension in the room coiling like a spring, yet he chose not to act with force. Instead, he crouched slightly, bringing himself down to her level without losing his imposing presence. "Who sent you?" he asked. "No one," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm on my own. Please, you can help me." Her tiny hands shook as she extended the envelope toward him. Alessandro took it, noting the worn edges, the faded stamp, and the messy handwriting that seemed almost childlike but deliberate. He opened it slowly, revealing a set of photographs, legal papers, and a folded note written in a hand he recognized immediately, though he hadn't seen it in over 15 years. His pulse quickened. The note was from someone from his past, someone he had loved, lost, and tried desperately to forget. Emily, the girl whispered her name. Emily Romano. She wasn't related to him, not by blood, but by circumstance, fate, and tragedy. She had become a bridge to a part of his life he thought he had sealed away forever. Her story spilled out in broken sentences, frantic explanations of debts, enemies, and a family torn apart by forces beyond her control. Alessandro listened, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to maintain dominance, to demand answers, to control the situation. And yet something about Emily, her courage, her innocence, her audacity made him pause. He felt a strange kinship, a connection he hadn't anticipated. She was fearless in a way that mirrored his own younger self, yet wholly vulnerable. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to her. But he couldn't stop thinking about the risk she had taken, the danger of the streets she had braved to find him. Her small hands clutched the envelope, as if it were her lifeline, her eyes never leaving his. He made a decision then, a choice that would shape both of their lives. He would hear her out. He would protect her, at least for now, and see where this unexpected path led. Because in all his years of power, control, and fear, no one had ever come to him this wide and afraid, unbroken and unflinching. And that was a new kind of challenge. "Sit," he commanded gently, motioning to the chair at his desk. She obeyed immediately, her small frame perched on the edge, eyes wide, waiting. "Sir." Alessandro leaned back in his own chair, letting the tension linger just enough to remind her and himself of the gravity of the moment. "You tell me everything," he said finally. "Every detail, leave nothing out." And so she did. She told him about her mother, about the people who had cheated them, about threats that stretched back years, threats that intersected with a world Alessandro knew well, the world he controlled, the world he dominated, the world he had learned to navigate with ruthless efficiency. But Emily's story was different. It wasn't about power or profit. It was about survival, fear, courage, and love. As she spoke, Alessandro felt a storm within him, one that mirrored the literal storm outside. His calculated, precise mind raced to connect dots, identify threats, and assess risks. But there was another voice, one quieter, softer, almost foreign, that whispered he should care, that he should act differently than he had for decades. By the time she finished, Alessandro had made another decision. Emily was no longer just a girl trespassing in his office. She was a responsibility. She was a responsibility. She was a life he could influence, protect, and guide if he chose to. And he would. For the first time in years, the walls around Alessandro Romano's heart were cracking, not from betrayal or fear, but from something wholly unexpected. Alessandro spent the next hour silently examining the documents Emily had brought. The papers were messy, torn at the edges, but they told a story that chilled him. Accounts had been siphoned, debts manipulated, property hidden, all orchestrated by people who had long thought themselves untouchable. And yet, here was a 10-year-old girl, her small hands clutching evidence that could unravel it all. Emily sat nervously on the edge of the chair, her eyes darting from the papers to him, aware of the gravity of the situation, but also of the sheer power radiating from the man in front of her. Alessandro noticed the way she flinched when he shifted his weight or adjusted his cufflinks. He wanted to reassure her, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he gestured toward the floor with a subtle motion, letting her know she could sit closer. Hesitant but trusting, she lowered herself, and for the first time the distance between their worlds shrank, if only slightly. "You understand," he said finally, voice low but steady, "that people will come for you if they realize what you have." Emily nodded quickly, fear and resolve warring in her expression. "I don't care," she whispered, almost defiantly. "I have to do this. I have to find the truth." Alessandro studied her for a long moment. He admired her courage, but he also recognized the naive bravery that often led to disaster in his line of work. "I won't let them hurt you," he said finally. The words surprised even him. He had never spoken like this before, not to rivals, not to allies, and certainly not to a child. And yet, the promise lingered in the air between them, unspoken but palpable. Emily's eyes softened, a fragile smile tugging at her lips. Alessandro almost laughed, the sound strange in the silent, paper-strewn office. The night stretched on, and Alessandro began organizing the information Emily had collected. There were names, accounts, locations, everything pointed to a web of deception and greed. It was a puzzle he knew how to solve, but he would need time, precision, and discretion. Emily watched him work, absorbing the meticulous way he moved, the careful calculation in every decision. "You're amazing," she said quietly. Alessandro paused, a slight smirk crossing his face. "Amazing?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm a man who survives," he replied dryly. "But you're braver than most people I've ever met." For the first time, Emily felt seen not just as a frightened girl, but as someone capable, determined, and strong. That recognition mattered more than any reassurance Alessandro could have given. And for Alessandro, her courage was a reminder of something he had lost along the way, the unfiltered tenacity of youth, the kind of bravery that existed before fear hardened the heart. By early morning, rain still drumming against the windows, Alessandro made a decision. He would not let Emily face this alone. He summoned two of his most trusted men, Luca and Marco, both seasoned enforcers who had followed him for decades. Alessandro briefed them quietly, emphasizing discretion. "This isn't a job for violence," he said. "We need information, strategy, protection." "She's not a pawn, she's the key." Luca and Marco exchanged glances, noting the unusual tone in their boss's voice. Alessandro rarely spoke this way, soft, protective, personal. They nodded and moved to carry out his instructions. Emily watched silently, her heart racing. She didn't fully understand the world Alessandro inhabited, but she sensed the gravity of it all. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets, it was about survival, loyalty, and trust. In the days that followed, Alessandro guided Emily through a careful plan. They traced the movements of those who had hidden the truth from her, uncovering hidden accounts and meeting with intermediaries who had been unwitting participants in the deception. Alessandro's mind was a steel trap, analyzing every possibility, predicting every move, and yet he allowed Emily to be involved, to contribute, to feel empowered rather than sidelined. As they worked together, Alessandro noticed small things: the way Emily's hands shook when she was nervous, the way her eyes lit up when she solved a puzzle, the quiet moments when she paused, processing information, connecting dots. He found himself protective of her in ways he had never imagined, not just because she was a child, but because she represented something untainted, something human, in a world that had long taught him only power and fear mattered. Then came a turning point. Emily discovered a hidden ledger, carefully coded, that implicated a powerful lawyer connected to her mother's debts. She turned to Alessandro, holding it out triumphantly. "I found it!" she exclaimed, eyes shining with a mixture of pride and fear. Alessandro took the ledger, scanning its contents with practiced precision. His lips pressed together as he realized the magnitude of what she had uncovered. The lawyer had thought himself untouchable. Now, thanks to a 10-year-old girl and his guidance, his empire of deceit was exposed. Alessandro felt a surge of pride, mixed with a protective instinct stronger than any he had experienced before. He looked at Emily and saw not just a child, but a partner in a dangerous, delicate game. He could see the strength in her, the courage that mirrored his own past, and a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. But danger was never far. That night, as they worked late, Alessandro noticed movement outside the office windows, figures lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. His instincts flared. "Stay behind me," he commanded quietly. Emily obeyed, ducking down behind his desk. Alessandro's mind raced, calculating threats, escape routes, and contingencies. He would protect her at all costs. The figures outside retreated when they realized Alessandro was aware of them, but the message was clear. Emily's actions had already attracted attention. This wasn't just about her mother's debts anymore. It was about power, territory, and the fragile balance Alessandro maintained in his world. The stakes had just skyrocketed, and now it was personal. As Emily curled up slightly in the chair, exhausted but alert, Alessandro allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. She had come to him terrified, alone, and desperate, and now she was a spark, a force that had ignited a series of events that neither of them could have predicted. He realized that his role was no longer just boss, enforcer, or strategist. He was a protector, a guide, and, in a way, a mentor. For Emily, the world had shifted overnight. The man who had initially terrified her now felt like an anchor in the storm. His presence was formidable, yes, but it was also oddly reassuring. She felt seen, valued, and capable, even in the face of danger that would have shattered most adults. And she understood, at least in part, that Alessandro Romano was a man shaped by power, loss, and love just like her, in a much harsher way. The night ended with Alessandro staring out over the city, Emily asleep in the chair beside him. He allowed himself a quiet vow. He would keep her safe. He would help her reclaim what had been taken, navigate the dangers ahead, and ensure that the courage she had shown did not go unnoticed or unrewarded. And for the first time in decades, Alessandro felt something unfamiliar, but profoundly real: hope. The days that followed were a blur of shadows, whispers, and calculated movements. Alessandro Romano never left Emily alone, yet he ensured she was never hidden behind a veil of fear. He wanted her to see the world clearly, even its danger, so she could learn to navigate it, survive it, and, perhaps, shape it in her own way. But tonight was different. Tonight, he sensed the first real threat closing in. Emily had found another clue, a set of letters carefully tucked away in the lawyer's office she had managed to sneak into earlier. her courage surpassing Alessandro's initial expectations. She handed them to him with trembling hands. These are my mother's, she said softly. They prove everything. All the debts, the lies, it's all here. Alessandro took the letters, reading the cramped handwriting, the official seals, the way someone had gone to great lengths to hide the truth. And as he read, his jaw tightened. The letters weren't just evidence, they were a roadmap of betrayal, involving people he had once trusted, people who had been part of his inner circle years ago. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Emily's fight was intertwined with his own past. He looked at her, sitting small in the oversized chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Emily," he said, his voice unusually gentle, almost unsteady. This isn't just your battle, it's mine too." She blinked at him, confusion mingled with hope. "Yours?" she asked. Alessandro hesitated, then nodded. "Many years ago, I trusted someone who betrayed me. I lost a lot, and it seems some of that betrayal has echoed into your life now. You've brought me back to the very beginning, to a truth I thought I had buried forever." He placed a firm hand on her shoulder, an anchor amid the storm of revelation. Emily flinched slightly but did not pull away. That night, the office was no longer a safe haven, it became a war room. Alessandro meticulously mapped out the connections, who was behind the debts, who stood to gain, who had manipulated the law, and who could be persuaded to confess. Emily watched, eyes wide, as he moved through the puzzle with precision, tracing lines in the air, making connections that were invisible to anyone else. She marveled at his intelligence, his calm under pressure, his unwavering focus. But as the night deepened, danger materialized. A car screeched outside the office building, the engine cutting out abruptly. Alessandro's instincts flared. "Stay down," he whispered, moving to the window. Two men lingered in the shadows, scanning the entrance. They weren't thugs sent to intimidate, they were professionals, precise, knowing exactly where to strike. Alessandro's mind raced. Every scenario, every possible outcome, every move he could make. He anticipated them all, and yet, beneath his calm exterior, a rare pang of worry for Emily stirred. "Who are they?" she whispered, fear evident but mingled with a strange determination. Alessandro glanced at her, caught between keeping her safe and letting her see the world as it truly was. "Enemies," he said finally, "but we'll handle them. Together." The confrontation was swift. Alessandro's men, Luca and Marco, moved with silent precision, positioning themselves strategically. Alessandro himself stayed close to Emily, ensuring her presence remained a shield and a motivator. The two men outside, realizing they had underestimated their target, backed off but not without sending a clear message. The fight had only just begun. Emily shivered, but she did not cry. She looked up at Alessandro, a mixture of awe and trust in her gaze. I thought I'd be alone," she admitted softly. Alessandro's chest tightened. He could not allow her to feel alone. Not for a moment. "You're not," he said. "Not now, not ever." Over the next several hours, Alessandro unraveled the network of betrayal surrounding Emily's mother. Each revelation was heavier than the last. Trusted friends had sold information. Lawyers had conspired. Even local authorities had turned a blind eye. And yet, in the midst of it, Alessandro found himself struck by Emily's unwavering courage. Where most would have crumbled, she pressed on, determined to see the truth revealed. In one quiet moment, Alessandro finally allowed himself to speak of his past apart. He had kept locked away behind steel and fear. "There was a woman I loved," he confessed, voice low, almost trembling. "I trusted her with everything, and I lost her. She left, but I couldn't stop it. I thought I had buried that part of me forever. And now, seeing you, watching you fight, I realize it never truly left." Emily looked up at him, comprehension dawning. She saw a man shaped by power and betrayal, yes, but also by loss, love, and a capacity to protect that was extraordinary. "You're like a father," she said tentatively. Alessandro froze, the words echoing in his mind. He had never had children. He had never allowed himself attachments like this. Yet somehow, in the midst of danger, in the midst of betrayal, he felt a bond with Emily stronger than anything he had ever experienced. By dawn, they had pieced together enough evidence to confront those responsible for Emily's mother's downfall. Alessandro knew it would be delicate. This was not a battle of guns and fists, but of power, leverage, and intellect. The people behind the scheme were dangerous, cunning, and ruthless, but Alessandro had patience, experience, and now, something he had long thought impossible, purpose beyond empire and money. As he prepared for the confrontation, Alessandro looked at Emily one last time, seeing the fatigue, the fear, and the unspoken pride in her eyes. "Tonight changes everything," he said softly. She nodded, clutching the envelope that had started it all. I'm ready," she said. Alessandro's mind raced, not with strategy this time, but with a realization that cut deeper than any threat could. Emily had not just uncovered the truth, she had unearthed a part of him that he thought was gone forever. She had reminded him that even a man like Alessandro Romano could feel hope, could feel care, and could be more than a figure of fear. And in that quiet, tension-filled moment, he understood the stakes were higher than just exposing lies. This was about redemption, trust, and connection. Emily had risked everything to come to him, and now he would risk everything to keep her safe and to finally face the ghosts of his own past. The city outside remained oblivious, the rain washing the streets clean, but inside Alessandro Romano's office, a war of loyalty, courage, and truth was reaching its zenith, and neither Alessandro nor Emily would emerge unchanged. The night had settled into a tense stillness. Alessandro Romano paced the office, the dim glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with anticipation. Emily sat quietly, the envelope clutched to her chest, her small hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to happen. Alessandro had traced every thread, uncovered every hidden account, every false claim, every lie that had stolen her family's life. But confronting the people behind it all was a different matter. These weren't ordinary criminals. These were men and women who wielded power, influence, and connections. Even he, Alessandro Romano, had to tread carefully, and yet he felt a rare spark of determination. This was personal, and Emily's courage had ignited something in him that years of battles never had. "They think they can hide behind money and influence," he muttered, more to himself than to Emily. She looked up at him, eyes wide, trusting, hoping. "We can stop them?" she whispered. Alessandro leaned down slightly, meeting her gaze. "We will," he said firmly. "But you have to stay close. Watch, listen, and learn. Not everyone will be as they seem." By midnight, they arrived at the first location, a luxury penthouse in the heart of the city. Alessandro's men, Luca and Marco, were strategically positioned outside, monitoring exits and entrances. Emily followed closely, silent and tense. She had never imagined herself stepping into a world like this where silence was power, observation was survival, and every gesture could carry weighty consequences. Inside, the lawyer responsible for manipulating her mother's debts was speaking on the phone, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Alessandro watched from the shadows, noting every detail, posture, tone, expression. Then he stepped forward. "Mr. De Luca," he said, voice smooth but commanding, cutting through the air like a scalpel. The man froze, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Alessandro Romano," he muttered, panic barely concealed. I don't know what you know exactly what," Alessandro interrupted. His gaze shifted briefly to Emily, who stood silently behind him. "This little girl found the truth you tried so desperately to bury, and now you'll answer for it." De Luca swallowed hard, his composure cracking. She's just a child. You can't. She's brave enough to face the world," Alessandro said sharply, "and I protect those who deserve it." He stepped closer, the weight of his presence making every lie, every scheme in the room feel exposed. Emily watched, amazed, as the man who had once terrified her transformed fear into power not just his own, but hers as well. Then came the revelation Alessandro had feared and anticipated. Hidden among De Luca's files were connections to people he had once trusted, former allies in his empire, who had betrayed him years ago. They had thought themselves untouchable, operating in the shadows, but Emily's courage had unearthed the truth, and now the balance of power was shifting. "You've been manipulating lives for years," Alessandro said, voice low and dangerous. "Not just hers, but mine, indirectly. You underestimated a child and a man who protects her. That was your first mistake." DeLuca's jaw tightened, sweat forming at his temples. He tried to deflect, to negotiate, but Alessandro's calm, measured presence allowed no room for deception. Emily stepped forward slightly, her voice small but firm. "You can't hide anymore," she said. "This ends tonight." Alessandro felt a surge of pride. She was no longer just a girl, she was a force, a testament to courage and determination. And in that moment, he realized the depth of their bond. Protector and protected, teacher and student, two survivors navigating a world that often valued power above all else. Confrontation turned to resolution quickly. DeLuca, realizing his options were gone, signed over documents, confessed misdeeds, and provided accounts that would restore Emily's family's assets. Alessandro guided the process, ensuring every detail was accounted for, every loophole closed. Emily's eyes shone with relief and amazement, the weight of years of injustice finally lifting. But the true turning point came later, when Alessandro confronted the personal connection behind the betrayal, a man from his own past. Someone he had once considered a brother, now revealed to be complicit. This revelation struck him harder than any threat or rival ever had. It, sir, wasn't just about money or influence, it was about trust, loyalty, and the fragile bonds that had defined his life. Alessandro's hands tightened into fists briefly, but then he breathed deeply. He would not react with rage alone. Instead, he used his intellect, his patience, and his understanding of human nature to dismantle the betrayal, ensuring that justice was served without unnecessary violence. Emily watched him, witnessing the full complexity of his character, powerful, calculated, yet capable of restraint and fairness. When the confrontation ended, Alessandro and Emily returned to his office, exhausted but victorious. Emily collapsed into the chair, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from fear, but from relief and awe. Alessandro watched her, his chest heavy with emotion. She had faced the world bravely, and together they had reclaimed what had been stolen. "You did more than survive tonight," he said quietly. "You helped set things right. You reminded me of who I used to be and who I can still be." Emily looked up at him, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "I just wanted to help," she said. Alessandro's lips pressed into a tight, rare smile. "You helped more than you know." That night, as rain returned softly outside the windows, Alessandro allowed himself to reflect on the journey. Emily had come to him terrified, desperate, and alone. Now, she was a symbol of hope, courage, and renewal, not just for her family, but for him as well. She had brought him face to face with his past, challenged his fears, and opened a door he thought had been locked forever. For Alessandro Romano, the world was still dangerous. Power and betrayal were constants in his life, but for the first time in decades, he understood that some things, courage, trust, and human connection, were worth more than fear or dominance. And in Emily, he had found not just a charge to protect, but a reason to believe that even in darkness, light could break through. The city outside Alessandro Romano's office had finally quieted. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of streetlights, reflections dancing like fragile memories. Inside, Alessandro and Emily sat across from one another, the remnants of the night's chaos slowly fading. Documents were organized, threats neutralized, and the balance restored for now. Emily exhaled deeply, the tension of the past days finally leaving her body. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "Everything, it's done?" Alessandro nodded, but his eyes remained watchful, scanning the shadows outside the window as if old habits could not be broken overnight. "It's done for now," he said. "The world doesn't stop being dangerous just because you win once. But tonight, yes, we've set things right." Emily looked up at him, gratitude and admiration in her eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you," she admitted. Alessandro shook his head slightly. "No," he said, his voice low, almost gruff. "You could have done this without me. You found the truth, Emily. You risked everything. I just guided you, kept you safe. That's my job. But this courage, this strength, that's all you." For the first time, Alessandro allowed himself to feel the weight of that statement. A 10-year-old girl, small, vulnerable, determined, had reminded him of the very qualities he had spent decades suppressing in himself: hope, empathy, and faith in human courage. He had spent his life surrounded by fear and respect, commanding loyalty through intimidation and strategy. And now he realized Respect earned through protection and trust felt far more profound. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Alessandro leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head, eyes on Emily. She shifted nervously, still clutching the envelope that had started it all. "Alessandro," she said, almost hesitantly, "why did you help me? You don't usually care about anyone outside your family or your empire." He paused, considering his words carefully. "Because you reminded me of what I lost," he admitted, his voice softer than she had ever heard, "and what I could still have. You showed me that even in a world ruled by power, fear, and betrayal, there's room for something else: trust, loyalty, courage, family." Emily's eyes widened, a mixture of awe and understanding. "Family?" she repeated softly. Alessandro nodded, letting the word linger in the room like a promise. "You're part of mine now," he said, "not by blood, but by bond, and I will protect you. Always." Emily blinked, tears welling in her eyes, but she smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying all the relief, gratitude, and hope she felt. Days turned into weeks, and the world outside Alessandro's office remained as chaotic as ever. But inside, a quiet peace settled. Emily began to learn the intricacies of the life she had stepped into: the careful planning, the strategic thinking, and the intelligence required to survive in a world where power was currency. Alessandro taught her, guiding her gently, correcting mistakes, and allowing her small victories to build confidence. She grew bolder, sharper, more perceptive, and Alessandro, in turn, discovered a depth of emotion he had long believed lost. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Alessandro and Emily stood by the office window, looking out over the city that had been both their battlefield and their classroom. Emily clutched the envelope, now empty but still symbolically significant. "I never thought I'd feel safe," she said quietly. Alessandro's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, firm yet reassuring. "You've earned safety," he said, "not because I give it to you but because of who you are. Brave, determined, unafraid to fight for what's right. That's protection enough in itself." Emily smiled, a bright, genuine expression that lit up the dim office. "And you?" she asked softly. "Are you happy?" Alessandro allowed himself a rare chuckle, the sound low and rich. "I am," he admitted, "because you reminded me that life isn't only about power or fear. It's about connection, loyalty, and courage. And tonight, I feel something I haven't felt in decades. I feel hope." The bond between them had transformed. Emily was no longer just a frightened girl who had stumbled into Alessandro's office. She was his ally, his student, his family. And Alessandro was no longer simply a feared Mafia boss. He was a protector, a mentor, and a man who had rediscovered the humanity he thought the world had long taken from him. Later that night, Alessandro watched as Emily prepared to leave for home, escorted safely by Luca and Marco. She turned back to him one last time before stepping into the elevator, her small hand waving goodbye. "Thank you for everything," she said. Alessandro nodded, a warm, rare smile on his face. "Remember," he said quietly, "courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about standing up even when you are." The elevator doors closed, and Alessandro remained by the window, staring at the city below. The rain had returned lightly, tapping against the glass. He allowed himself to breathe deeply, letting the weight of the past days settle into something lighter, something enduring. Emily had changed him or her bravery, her honesty, her resilience, and he knew he would carry the lessons of this journey with him forever. For Alessandro Romano, the world remained dangerous, unpredictable, and at times ruthless. But he had found a reason to hope. He had found a reason to hope. He had found a reason to trust. And he had found a reason to protect, not for fear, not for power, but for love, the kind of love that transcends bloodlines, status, and fear itself. As he finally sat back, the city stretching endlessly before him, he whispered softly to himself, "No one hurts the people I care about, not ever again." And in that moment, Alessandro Romano, the powerful, intelligent, emotionally complex Mafia boss, allowed himself to feel fully alive, fully human, and fully connected. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Cinematic Mafia. Love for more powerful stories like this. Your support keeps these stories alive.